The unforgiving sun beat down on the dusty landscape of Colorado, baking the cracked earth and bleaching the sagebrush a pale, sickly green. Jedediah Jed Stone, a man whose face was a roadmap of weathered lines and a life lived on the fringe, guided his mule, Rusty, through a narrow canyon. He wasn't a prospector seeking gold, nor a hunter tracking game. Jed was a mountain man, a solitary figure who found more comfort in the silent, sprawling wilderness than in the clamor of town. His only companions were the rustle of the wind and the distant cries of hawks circling overhead. His journey had led him to this remote corner of the mountains, an area whispered to be cursed, where whispers of a ghost child echoed on the wind. Jed scoffed at such tales. He knew the mountains held no ghosts, only echoes of forgotten tragedies. His goal was simpler, to find a place to set up camp, away from the encroaching civilization he so despised. As he rounded a bend, the entrance to an old abandoned mine appeared, a black maw carved into the side of the mountain. A chilling draught of cold air escaped from its depths, a stark contrast to the searing heat of the day. Jed dismounted, his keen eyes scanning the ground. The dust was thick, but he saw something that made his heart skip a beat, a small, faint footprint. It was too small to be an animal, too worn to be recent, but undeniable. He knew the tale of the orphan boy, a young lad named Finn who had vanished from a nearby orphanage years ago. The townsfolk had searched, but eventually the trail had gone cold, and Finn had become another lost soul in the vastness of the West. Jed, however, had a gut feeling that this footprint, a ghost of a child's shoe, was his first real clue. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to continue on his solitary path. But Jed had a haunted past of his own, a memory of a family he'd lost to the wild, a feeling of helplessness he carried with him like a heavy stone. This boy, if he was indeed inside that mine, represented a chance to rewrite that chapter, to not turn away when someone needed help. With a heavy sigh, he took a deep breath, and with a flick of his wrist, he lit a lantern. The flickering light cast long, dancing shadows on the canyon walls as he stepped into the darkness, the mine's entrance swallowing him whole. His lantern illuminated the decaying timber and damp rock walls. The air grew colder, and a profound silence, heavier than the oppressive heat outside, settled over him. He was a man of the wild, but this was a different kind of wild, one of darkness and solitude, a place where hope went to die. He pushed forward, the small, faint footprints his only guide, each step echoing the desperate plea of a forgotten child. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. The deeper Jed ventured, the more the air filled with the scent of damp earth and stale dust. The mine's twisting tunnels were a labyrinth of cold, dark passages, each one a dead end waiting to trap the unwary. His lantern cast a weak circle of light, revealing the ghosts of past miners in the form of rusty tools and collapsed support beams. He was following the footsteps of a phantom, a boy who, by all accounts, should not exist in these unforgiving depths. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a low, rhythmic cough. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakably human. A jolt of adrenaline shot through Jed's veins. He was not alone. The footsteps led him to a small, makeshift barricade of rocks and fallen timber tucked away in a side tunnel. Jed carefully pushed the debris aside, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind it was a small alcove, and huddled in the corner, wrapped in tattered cloth, was a boy. He was thin, his face a pale mask of dirt and malnutrition, but his eyes, wide and terrified, were unmistakably alive. It was Finn, the boy who had vanished years ago. He was older now, but the same haunted look was in his eyes, a reflection of a fear that had been his constant companion for too long. He flinched away from the light, his small body trembling. Years of solitude and the constant threat of the mines had made him feral, a wild creature hiding in the dark. Jed spoke in a low, gentle voice, the kind of voice one uses to calm a frightened animal. "It's all right, son. I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Jed. I'm here to help." The boy said nothing, his eyes darting between Jed and the lantern, his small frame still and wary. Jed slowly reached into his satchel and pulled out a piece of dried venison and a canteen. He placed them on the ground a few feet from the boy, a silent offering of peace. Finn's eyes, drawn to the food and water, finally flickered with a hint of something other than fear. Hunger. Jed knew this was the first step. The physical wounds of hunger and thirst were one thing, but the psychological scars of years spent alone in this tomb were another. He had to earn the boy's trust, a task that might prove more difficult than navigating the treacherous tunnels of the mine itself. The truth of what had happened to Finn, what had driven him to hide in this dark place, was a mystery Jed was determined to unravel. The journey back to civilization wouldn't just be a trek through the mountains. It would be a slow, arduous climb out of the depths of a boy's trauma. Finn cautiously approached the food, snatching the venison and devouring it with a feral intensity. He drank from the canteen, with the same desperate urgency, his small hands shaking. Jed watched, his heart heavy. The boy was a ghost of a child, a silent testament to a world that had forgotten him. Jed spent the next few hours simply existing in the same space, giving Finn time to acclimate to his presence. He spoke little, but his quiet, steady demeanor slowly began to chip away at the boy's wall of fear. After the boy had eaten, Jed began to talk, not to Finn directly, but to the darkness of the mine itself. He spoke of the outside world, of the scent of pine after a rainstorm, of the sight of a mountain goat silhouetted against the sunrise. He told stories of his own life, of the hardships and the solitude, but also of the quiet moments of beauty and peace he found in the wild. He didn't push for answers, but with each story, he was building a bridge, a fragile connection between the two of them. Finally, after hours of silence broken only by Jed's low voice, Finn spoke. His voice was a rasp, unused and hoarse. "They didn't want me." Jed stopped his story, his gaze falling on the boy. "The other boys, at the orphanage, they said I was a jinx, bad luck." The words came out in a rush, a dam of years of unspoken pain breaking. Finn explained how he had run away, seeking refuge in the only place he felt safe, the wilderness. He had stumbled upon the abandoned mine and had been living there ever since, surviving on what he could scavenge from the town and what he knew about foraging. The truth was a punch to the gut for Jed. The boy's isolation wasn't just a result of a tragic accident, but of cruelty. The weight of his own past returned, the memories of his own family's tragedy and the isolation that had followed. He saw a kindred spirit in Finn, a fellow outcast. A deep sense of protectiveness, something he hadn't felt in years, welled up inside him. He knew now that his journey was no longer about just getting Finn out of the mine. It was about healing, about showing the boy that not all people were cruel, that he wasn't a jinx, and that there was a place for him in the world. Jed finally stood, his bones creaking from the cold. "We're getting out of here, son. I'm taking you home." The word home hung in the air, a foreign concept for both of them. Jed knew it wouldn't be easy, but as he looked at the boy's small, hopeful eyes, he knew he couldn't turn back. The journey out of the mine was just the beginning. The real challenge lay in the long, uncertain path ahead. The trek out of the mine was slow and deliberate. Jed led the way, his lantern bobbing, and Finn followed close behind, his small hand gripping the edge of Jed's coat. The boy was weak, his movements clumsy, and Jed had to stop frequently to let him rest. He carried Finn over particularly treacherous sections, the boy's light weight a stark reminder of his years of hardship. The physical toll on Finn was evident in his shallow breathing and the dark circles under his eyes, but a new light had entered them, a fragile spark of hope. As they neared the entrance, a new sound began to filter through the tunnels, the rhythmic thud of a pickaxe against rock. Jed froze, his hand on Finn's shoulder. His face, usually a mask of calm resolve, tightened with concern. It was a prospecting team. Jed knew their kind, men who cared only for gold, who would see a wild-looking boy and a weathered mountain man as a nuisance, or worse, a source of trouble. He couldn't risk them taking Finn, not after all he'd been through. He found a small, hidden fissure in the rock wall. "Listen to me, son," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "You have to hide in here. Don't make a sound. I'll get rid of them and then I'll come back for you." Finn's eyes widened with renewed fear, a look that tore at Jed's heart. He was reliving the abandonment he had fled from years ago. Jed gently placed a hand on his face. "I promise, I'm coming back for you. You have to trust me." The boy hesitated for a moment. Then, with a nod, he slipped into the dark crevice, disappearing from sight. Jed, now alone, moved stealthily towards the mine entrance. He could hear the voices of the prospectors now, a gruff, loud banter that grated on his ears. He needed to get them out of there, to create a diversion. He spotted a loose support beam and with a few well-placed shoves sent it toppling, causing a cascade of rocks to fall with a thunderous roar. The prospectors, startled and alarmed, began shouting, convinced the mine was collapsing. It was enough of a distraction. They retreated, their voices fading into the distance as they fled the unstable tunnel. Once the sounds were gone, Jed quickly returned to the fissure. "Finn, it's me. You can come out now." The boy emerged, his face stained with tears, his small body trembling. The fear in his eyes was replaced by an immense relief, a raw emotion that Jed understood completely. The journey out of the mine had just become more complicated, and Jed knew that their biggest obstacles were not the mountains, but the people who inhabited them. He also knew that he would do whatever it took to protect this boy, even if it meant risking his own life. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. Leaving the mine behind felt like shedding a heavy cloak of darkness. The sunlight was blinding, but Jed and Finn embraced it, a silent acknowledgement of their freedom. The journey down the mountain was a slow process. Finn, weakened by years of malnutrition, struggled with the steep terrain. Jed, with his vast knowledge of the mountains, found gentler paths and secret springs, ensuring the boy stayed hydrated and as comfortable as possible. He taught Finn how to spot edible plants and identify animal tracks, sharing his wisdom of the wild. Finn, in turn, began to open up more. He spoke of the loneliness, the constant cold, and the fear of the dark that had been his constant companions. He also spoke of the small triumphs, the day he found a forgotten stash of canned food, the moment he realized he could catch small animals to eat. Jed listened patiently, his silence a sign of his unwavering support. He was not just a rescuer, he was a mentor, a surrogate father figure. He saw Finn not as a victim, but as a survivor, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They made camp under the vast starlit sky, the silence of the mountains a soothing balm. Jed cooked a hearty meal of squirrel and forage mushrooms, a meal that was simple but tasted like a feast to Finn. For the first time in years, the boy felt safe. The warmth of the fire, the taste of real food, and the steady presence of Jed were a comfort he had forgotten existed. As the fire crackled, Jed finally spoke of his own past, of a wife and a young son he had lost to a flash flood years ago. He told Finn how he had run away from the pain, seeking solace in the solitude of the mountains. He saw the understanding in Finn's eyes, the shared experience of loss and loneliness creating a bond between them stronger than blood. This was more than just a rescue. It was two lost souls finding a way back to the world, together. The morning light found them with a new sense of purpose. They were no longer a solitary mountain man and a lost orphan. They were Jed and Finn, a team, a new kind of family forged in the fire of shared hardship. The path ahead was still long, and the world they were re-entering was full of its own dangers, but they were no longer facing it alone. The wilderness had given them a second chance, and they were determined not to let it go to waste. The journey continued, and with each passing day, Finn's health and spirit improved. He learned to ride Jed's mule, Rusty, and began to laugh, a sound that Jed hadn't thought he would ever hear. His laughter was a music that filled the empty spaces in Jed's heart, a melody of healing and renewal. They were a strange sight, a grizzled mountain man and a small, wiry boy, but they were content in their new dynamic. Their peace was shattered one afternoon when they rode into a small, desolate town on the outskirts of civilization. Jed needed supplies, and he knew they couldn't avoid towns forever. As they entered, they were met with stares, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. The rumors of the ghost child from the orphanage had spread far and wide, and Finn's wild, unkempt appearance made him instantly recognizable. Jed tried to keep a low profile, but it was impossible. He was approached by a burly man, the town sheriff, a man whose face was as grim as the dusty town itself. "Jedediah Stone," the sheriff said, his voice a low growl. "Heard you were in these parts. And who is this with you?" Jed knew this was coming. He had hoped to avoid it, but the law had a long reach, even in the wilderness. "This is Finn," Jed said, his hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. "He's been through a lot. I'm taking him to get help." The sheriff scoffed. "Helping him? Or holding him? There's a bounty out for that boy's return, dead or alive. An old prospector named Silas claims he ran away with a stash of his gold, said he saw him sneaking out of his tent that night." The accusation hit Jed like a blow. He knew it wasn't true. Finn had told him the truth, a tale of running from cruelty, not from a crime. But the sheriff's words had turned the town against them. The stares became glares, the suspicion turning into outright hostility. Jed knew he couldn't fight them all. He had to think of a way to protect Finn, to prove his innocence. He had to face not just the wilderness, but the treachery of men, the same kind of men who had driven Finn to hide in the first place. Jed and Finn were now fugitives, hunted by a town that believed a lie. The journey home had just become a desperate race for survival. Jed and Finn fled the town under the cover of night, the sound of the sheriff's angry shouts echoing behind them. The bounty on Finn's head was a cruel twist of fate, a new obstacle that threatened to tear them apart. Jed, however, was not a man to be deterred. He had a plan, a desperate one, but a plan nonetheless. He knew where Silas lived, a small cabin on the outskirts of the town, near the abandoned mine. He also knew that the mine itself held the key to Finn's innocence. He and Finn rode through the night, the cold air a stark contrast to the burning anger in Jed's heart. He was a man of the wild, and he knew how to move unseen, how to avoid the prying eyes of the law. They reached Silas's cabin just as the sun was rising, casting a pale, weak light on the scene. Silas, a grizzled old man with a perpetually angry scowl, was already out, panning for gold in the nearby stream. He was alone. Jed dismounted and approached him, leaving Finn hidden behind a large boulder. "Silas," Jed said, his voice low and dangerous. "We need to talk." Silas looked up, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "You're that mountain man. You got that little thief with you." Jed ignored the jibe. "He's not a thief. I know the truth. You found that gold in the mine, didn't you? You didn't want the world to know, so you blamed an innocent boy." Silas's face went pale, a clear sign of his guilt. The confrontation turned violent. Silas, panicked, lunged at Jed with a rusty pickaxe. Jed, a man of the mountains, was quick. He dodged the blow and wrestled Silas to the ground, pinning him. "Tell me the truth, Silas. Tell me you found that gold in the mine and that you lied about Finn." Silas, defeated, finally broke. "All right, it's true. I found a pocket of gold in the abandoned mine. I was afraid they'd take it from me if they knew, so I made up the story about the boy to cover my tracks." The confession was a victory, but it was a hollow one. The sheriff and his men, alerted by the commotion, had arrived. They saw Jed, a man with a reputation for trouble, holding a panicked Silas to the ground. The truth in their eyes was a twisted tale of a mountain man threatening a harmless old prospector. They arrested Jed on the spot. Finn, seeing his only hope for a future being taken away, screamed from behind the boulder. The sheriff and his men, however, were too focused on Jed to notice. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. Jed was taken to the town jail, a small, rickety building that smelled of stale whiskey and despair. He was a man of the wild, and the confinement felt like a physical pain. He was alone, but his mind was with Finn. He knew the boy was still out there, hiding in the mountains, alone once again. His only hope was to find a way out, to prove his own innocence, and, more importantly, to get Finn the justice he deserved. Meanwhile, Finn, a small boy alone in a big, cruel world, was faced with an impossible choice. He could run, hide in the mountains he knew so well, and return to his solitary life. Or he could do something he had never done before, trust someone besides Jed. He knew the sheriff's men wouldn't believe him, but he had to try. He had to save Jed, the one person who had ever believed in him. He waited until dusk, his small body shivering from a combination of cold and fear. He then rode Rusty back into town, his small form a ghost in the twilight. He went to the one place he knew would have the answers, the town saloon. It was a bustling place, full of loud, drunk men, but Finn knew his way around. He had to find a way to get the real story out, to make them listen. He spotted an old woman, the town's seamstress, who had always been kind to him during his few trips to town with the orphanage. He cautiously approached her, his small voice barely audible over the din of the saloon. "Mrs. Gable, I need your help. They've arrested Jed. He didn't do anything wrong." Silas lied. The old woman, a kind soul with a sharp mind, listened intently. She knew the rumors about the mountain man, but she also knew the vindictive nature of Silas. She had a gut feeling that this boy, with his wide, honest eyes, was telling the truth. Mrs. Gable, with Finn in tow, went to the sheriff's office. The sheriff scoffed at their story, but Mrs. Gable, a respected member of the community, was not to be trifled with. She convinced him to go to Silas's cabin to see the proof for himself. Finn, with a newfound bravery, led them to the exact spot where Jed had confronted Silas. There, buried under a loose floorboard, was a small but significant pouch of gold. The evidence was irrefutable. The discovery of the gold was a turning point. The sheriff, a man who respected justice even when it was inconvenient, was forced to confront the truth. Jed was released, and Silas was arrested. The town's opinion, once a tide of suspicion, now turned into a wave of apology and relief. Jed was no longer a dangerous outlaw, but a hero. The boy, Finn, was no longer a thief, but a brave survivor. The town, in an act of collective atonement, rallied around them. They offered Jed and Finn a place to stay, a warm bed and hot meals, and a chance to truly rest for the first time in years. Finn, once an outcast, was now seen as a symbol of hope and resilience. He had a family of sorts now, a community that had seen his bravery and was willing to embrace him. Jed, however, was a man of the mountains. The town was a comfort, but it was not his home. He knew that his journey with Finn had a different purpose. It wasn't about finding a permanent home in a place of men, but about helping Finn find his own strength, his own way in the world. He had given the boy back his dignity, his innocence, and now he had to give him back his life. He spoke to Finn one night as they sat by the fire, the sounds of a vibrant town replacing the quiet of the wilderness. "Finn," he said, his voice as gentle as the wind, "you're a strong boy. You've survived things no one should have to. You have a chance now, a life here with people who care about you." Finn looked at him, his eyes filled with a new kind of fear, the fear of Jed leaving. "But what about you? What about us?" Jed smiled, a genuine, rare smile that lit up his weathered face. "I'll always be here for you, son. But my home is in the mountains. I've got to go back. But you have a future here, a chance to be a part of something bigger, a chance to find a real home." Oh. It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. Jed knew that to truly save Finn, he had to let him go. The mountain man's journey had been a long and winding one, but he knew that his final act of love was to set the boy free, to give him a future he had never dared to dream of. The day of Jed's departure was quiet and somber. The town gathered to see him off, a mix of gratitude and respect in their eyes. Jed, however, was focused on Finn. The boy, dressed in clean new clothes, looked older, stronger, more whole. He was no longer the feral child of the mine, but a boy on the cusp of a new life. They said their goodbyes by the town's edge, under the vast blue sky. "I'll be back, son," Jed said, his voice thick with emotion. "The mountains are my home, but a part of me will always be here, with you." Finn nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He handed Jed a small carved wooden bird he had made himself. "To remember me by," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Jed took the gift, a small piece of the boy's heart, and tucked it safely in his satchel. He mounted Rusty, his weathered face a mask of resolute farewell. As he rode away, he didn't look back. He couldn't. His heart was heavy with the weight of the goodbye, but it was also full of a peace he hadn't felt in years. He had found a lost boy, but he had also found a part of himself he thought he'd lost forever. The ghost of his past, the memory of his own lost son, was finally laid to rest. Years passed. Jed continued his solitary life in the mountains, a legend, a myth whispered around campfires. But he was no longer a man running from his past. He was a man with a purpose, a quiet guardian of the wilderness, and a silent protector of a new generation. He would occasionally ride into town, not to stay, but to see Finn. He would watch from afar, a familiar figure in the distance, a silent sentinel. Finn grew into a young man, strong and kind, a pillar of the community. He never forgot the man who had saved him, the man who had shown him that love and kindness could be found even in the darkest of places. He would tell his own children the story of the mountain man who had entered an abandoned mine, a story of rescue, of courage, and of the profound, lasting bond between two lost souls who had found each other. And sometimes, when he looked out at the vast, sprawling mountains, he would see a solitary figure on a mule, and he would smile, a silent nod to the man who was his true father, his hero. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content.